All right, and welcome back to the Prometheus Deep Dive, a CNC podcast. This is where we talk about the most recent episode, and that is Season 2, Episode 10, What the Jury Thinks. Today is my co-host. I just want to welcome Matt. Matt has been an org friend for a little while. We were a part of the same community of one of my first org games, although we never played together. But how you doing
we've
today,
never
Matt?
played together. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Casey. I'm excited to be
Yes.
here.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's great that I finally had you on again because I think I had you on for the first season as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's kind of hop right into it. We got a lot to cover today.
Let's do it.
So first off, we saw two boots. Let's start off with Antonio. So what did you think about Antonio?
So I know Antonio from the org community on Discord. We've been friends on there for a while. So when I found out he was playing this game, I was really excited to see them kind of thrive. Bummed that they're gone now, but he was kind of a force this game, even up until his boot. So I'm glad to see him put some effort in. He always does pretty well. So it was fun to see him give it a shot this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can 100% tell that Antonio was probably the most threatening player in the game, not only for their challenge wins, but also I mean, even hearing Antonio, argue all of his points to everyone of why he should stay in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, he can articulate his points really well.
I know.
I
Yeah.
could I could have 100% seen him still staying in.
I too. I feel like with Antonio, he has the charisma that makes you want him to stay in. And then when it gets to the crunch time, he's always able to really quickly use the small amount of time he has to really try to get his points across. I almost thought he was going to be staying this episode because I thought when he was talking to Michael that he was making a lot of sense about what he was kind of saying in terms of us needing each other going forward. And I mean, I guess we'll see next episode if that's the case, but.
Yeah. I mean, especially with the whole, I believe as Antonio phrased it, misting, he's misting Michael into, trying to convince him that he was the person running the game, that Bloody had been, setting that up, which was definitely not true. Bloody was 100% talking about Antonio. I mean, that was really cool. And I think you couldn't fault, Jocelyn at all. And even, the sticks in the stick segment, the jury says it, you couldn't fault Jocelyn at all for keeping Antonio around. Because honestly, I actually do think that if there's one person in the end that could have taken on Antonio, it would have actually been Jocelyn.
I fully agree with that too. Just numbers wise, it makes sense for them two to try to go off against each other. And then from Jocelyn's point of view, just having somebody that wants to work with you is huge. And so Antonio being the person that is playing his own game, but then also always messaging probably Jocelyn, I assume, the whole time that they're chatting, and Jocelyn having not false hope, but any hope in Antonio is huge at that point in the game. And so I was rooting for both of them this episode. And unfortunately that wasn't.
Yeah, someone else someone else messaged the same thing yesterday. They were just those two were the two they really wanted to win. And, of course, we saw what happened in this episode. But, Antonio was seriously, I mean, it's so cool to, and I hope Antonio feels this way, but it's cool to have his game immortalized like this. Because I think this shows how good of a player he is. He has that proof on video. But I do think as much as we could talk about how great of, a player Antonio is, he probably did not do the best to manage his threat level because he won almost every single challenge. And so you better make sure you can literally win out till the end.
Yeah. And he almost did, but you're right. He definitely I think with these shorter games, shorter being a weekend long, you really do have this plan to at the beginning, slow your roll and not steamroll everything. But when you're kind of as good at stuff as Antonio and stuff's coming at you fast and you're a target already, he was kind of saying it once I won one, then I wanted to win the next one and then the next one and the next one. And so you kind of fall into that trap. But I mean, to be honest, I did think that he had kind of maybe a stay as to why he should be kept there even when he lost. So that's just proof to Antonio having the gaming ability that he does. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to make one more comment about the whole like Michael Jocelyn, Antonio thing, like that was once again, that was a really good pitch. But I think, and this is going to go into, more of what we'll talk about with the Sticks and other players later. But like, I think even he underestimated how much, Michael is aware of what's going on in the game, and he's aware of his perception in the game. So he does realize that, Antonio can stay. His best bet is to go against any of the other, three, and who is now the final four. So, I mean, maybe that was a little bit of a disadvantage on his part. But yeah, if you don't have anything else about Antonio, we can move on to Jocelyn.
Sounds good.
All right. So Jocelyn, clearly the second biggest, competitor in the game. Jocelyn, if my numbers are correct, Jocelyn had won 3 individual immunities. Antonio won 4. So, I mean, they're right behind each other. Although it still feels like in hindsight, like when you're trying to think back to the episodes, it still feels like Antonio won so much more than he did. But 3 is still very impressive, especially given that there pretty much was no one else that had won the challenges. So what'd you think about Jocelyn?
Yeah, so Jocelyn was somebody at the beginning of the season I had on my like short list of people to watch out for. I just really loved her energy. And so this whole season, seeing her be the last one from her starting team, that was really just like exciting as a viewer for me to watch. And she's been putting up a really good fight. So it was unfortunate to see it come just short of the finale. But she, I think this round knew that she would be in trouble. And I don't really know if there's really anything she could do besides winning the challenge at this point. And it's unfortunate that people knew that the next challenge is most likely going to be the same as last season, where it's you have to win the challenge to get to the end. And so that combined with not having many allies, especially after Antonio left, kind of was like a kiss of death, I think, for Jocelyn. But I don't think she should be underestimated going forward into future orgs or anything like that, because she put up quite the fight this season. And I think that she was very smart with how neutral she played a lot of the time, because it gave people the opportunity to either forget about her or pick her up and use her, so there was lots of opportunities for her to kind of finagle in. And I think she did a really good job with her twist status this season too, as being one of the, what was the word for it? The elder system. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think she played the elder role pretty well too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually the way that you just phrased it with the neutral aspect of it, it really did allow her to be forgotten or to be scooped up. And we saw that, she was always pretty much aligned with Antonio since early in day 2. But yeah, it did allow, other targets to be taken out first. Unfortunately, we saw like everything that happened with Louise, and then Ben speaks for himself. Then he was taken out. Then Michael sort of had this like tunnel vision to get. So, I mean, and I feel like if the game was slightly more fluid, she might have even had a lot more wiggle room to make it even that much further.
For sure.
But yeah, 100%, especially given that Jocelyn's never played any sort of game like this. It's very impressive. Yeah. I'm impressed really when any new orger makes it this far. Which we'll probably also talk about when we get to Tracy. But it was really unfortunate too. Even she says like, and it reminds me of season 1 with Andrew and his situation, but like with Jocelyn, like it was one question she got wrong that prevented a tie. And when you also look at the other question about the logo, her saying green, like, I mean, I was thinking going into that challenge, I really was thinking that Jocelyn was going to win that pretty much flawlessly. And we did have 2 tiebreaker questions ready to go if it had happened. But very unfortunate. But yeah,
it's a shame. But congrats to Erin on that win, because she pulled that out when nobody thought that she was going to pull that one out. So that was cool. But yeah, in terms of Jocelyn, I really respected her game this season, especially since it was a little bit, I think, like more in the shadows. But we saw all the big personalities that she started the game with make it to merge and then get bumped. So, I mean, I think she made the right decision in how she played this game. So I don't think she should have any regrets, even if it came down that quickly to that challenge. So
Yeah. I mean, Jocelyn was pretty much the ultimate underdog of the whole season, which is such a
Yeah.
cool like title to also have.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other little note too, that like I was freaking dying when I originally watched the footage, and then when I got to the edit for this episode, I completely forgot about it and like died all over again. But the tapestry thing,
Oh, I laughed so hard at that. Yeah.
yeah, because the thing is I had, when I'm watching them in any time in the main room, that tapestry is right behind her, and I never noticed it. But then it's like once she finally said it, you're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it is actually upside down. But I
Yeah.
thought that was really funny. And I know a couple other people messaged me too saying that they like had died about that line.
Yeah. It was funny.
Um, all right, so next up, who would you like to talk about who is now in the final four, who has made it to the finale of season 2?
Yeah, I mean, let's start with Erin because I think that she had a really climactic episode after kind of lurking in the shadows a bit for a while too, similar to how Jocelyn kind of was. But yeah, I really like Erin as well. She was somebody at the beginning of the game that I remember. All that was really being talked about her was that she was a little bit quieter and a little bit more reserved. But I think this episode we saw that she has a pretty good understanding of the game. She was in a position where she kind of got to decide what she wanted to do in terms of if she wanted to either go with Antonio and Jocelyn, or if that was just a facade and she was really good at chatting with them and kind of knew that they should have left. Regardless, I think that she had a lot of positioning that was really helpful for her this episode, combined with the challenge win, and then also starting to show the jury what she's been actually doing. I think that all three of those things give her a really good episode this episode. So good job, Erin.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like this was like Erin's episode, and it's similarly to like our previous episode. I feel like Michael had such a great episode during episode 9. Now Erin's had her episode, which is really cool. But yeah, it's really funny looking back on her game where she was actually one vote away from literally being voted out the very first time. And yeah, I mean, like, it's just crazy how you can turn your whole game around like that.
Right.
But yeah, I think, one of the unique things about Erin's game and that you see in day 2 is that she has been in a pretty good position. She has been, even if they weren't as closely aligned to her even though she wasn't as closely in the reality of it aligned as close to like Tracy or Bloody, people had that perception she still could use those. She then had the Jocelyn and Antonio thing, and then now she has the Michael and CJ thing, which clearly she has gone with, as we saw twice now in this past episode. So yeah, she has really flipped her game around and put herself in a fantastic position. And also like shout out to her for both performances in the challenge, not only winning the last one, but also being able to hold up the quarters that long, because as we saw, nobody, like half the people weren't able to even get it up in the first 45 seconds, especially our challenge beast Antonio. He couldn't do it.
I know. So definitely kudos to Erin. I think that at the beginning of the game, that was like such good plot armor for her to have all those votes go against her. And now in this late game, I'm kind of like, oh, interesting. Like as a Michelle Fitzgerald fan, I'm pretty sure if Michelle went to tribal pre-merge, she would have went home, people always say. And so to see them kind of those type of players where they have a great personality, people like them, but they're maybe not in like the full thick of everything visibly. At the end of the game, they really start to turn it on after some of those huge big characters leave, and you see them starting to show that the whole time they knew what they were doing. They just didn't have to prove it yet. And now I'm really excited to see Erin go into this finale, because I think she might be my winner pick at this point if I was on the jury.
Interesting. Which actually, let's lean towards kind of who the jury right now is pushing up. We heard Antonio actually speak to Michael's game and saying that he was definitely playing a really good game and he's laid a lot of the groundwork, which is definitely true. I mean, once again, Michael sort of had his big last episode where he laid his ideal final 3. He laid the foundation for that alliance and the path they needed to make forward. What are your thoughts on Michael?
I think he's been doing a really good job. He's never been like the biggest threat, but he's been consistently like showing everyone that he's playing, which I think is smart. Once you get to the end, it's very easy for people to be like, oh, I mean, you only turned it on at the end, which is what I was just kind of saying about Aaron. But on the flip side, Michael is opposite of that, where he's kind of been slowly. And at this point, when there aren't any huge, big players left, like the Bloody or the Antonio, Michael obviously knew that at this point in the game that would be huge for him to still have his gameplay and ability be shown, but without those kind of big players right next to him. And so I think it's just very clear that Michael's been doing a good job. So I don't know how he'll do next round with the challenge. I think that's kind of, we'll see who doesn't get the challenge done, but I think he has a really strong case if he was to get to the end. And I think the jury's aware of that. So it's just going to come down to maybe who's next to him. And then if the surprise of Erin, who I assume will probably be there, especially with her last two challenge performances, can take him on, that type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these games, you know, we've even seen dominant players in the game of Survivor who have literally lost due to poor performance at the, you know, Final Tribal Council. And right. So, I mean, I think, and I honestly think this, I'm not really one to kind of bullshit things just because this is my game and these are my players, but I actually think there is a real and a real strong case for any four of them to win if they make it to the end. Yeah. You know, we've already easily outlined, you know, Aaron and Michael. So let's go to Tracy next. You know, Tracy has actually gotten, you know, it's mentioned multiple times, literally since the beginning of day 2, that, you know, Tracy, if she makes it to the end, she can snag quite a bit of jury votes. And she was deemed to be most likable in the first challenge of day 2. And in addition to that, despite her being an elder and not having a vote, she actually has always voiced her input about who she thinks should go home. And, you know, starting off with the Maddie vote right in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, Tracy's definitely funny in that regard, because from the first day, she's been like, I'm a straight shooter. This is what I'm thinking. And people have been not like intimidated by that. They've been welcoming to that. It's like, at first, when I first saw her, I was like, oh, that's like a first player type of mentality of openly speaking everything you're feeling. But we can see how that can obviously super benefit you when you are the type of person who doesn't hide stuff. So it's not like she was just doing it to like try to make allies. You can tell that's really her character being brought into the game. I think with Tracy, it's interesting because when she is in this position where she's at the end game now, even if she hasn't made all the same big moves as some other people and that they're going to outline at the end, I think that she makes a very appealing case to be voted for somebody that has been juried really quickly from the minority. Like people like Louise or maybe Ben might see their game ending early and be like, well, shoot, who do I root for now? And then seeing a really fun personality who's in their first game and kind of openly performed and talked and spent the whole weekend pushing effort in, that's a very valuable reason to be voted for if the person you were rooting for leaves. And so I think Tracy has a really great position going into the end for that regard, because even if she hasn't played the same exact game as everybody else, she is rootable, and there's people on the jury who are looking for somebody to root for right now. So I think that she definitely should be proud of her game as well, because it's her first one and she got to the end. So
yeah. First game, in addition to that, she is 52 years old, well above, not that she's old at all, well above the average for this cast, which I think the average is like late 20s, like around 30 is like the average, you know. And then also, she doesn't watch any reality competitions. Like watching season 1 of Prometheus is literally her introduction to reality competitions. And it's funny, you can see her game in day 1. Then you can see her game at the beginning of day 2 after she took the night to kind of finish watching season 1. And now it's completely transformed by the end of season 2. It's a very interesting journey. It's a very interesting progress. And it's the type of story that if you sell it well, could potentially grant you a sweep in the finals. I love Tracy. Sure. Love Tracy.
I super agree with that. Totally.
All right. So now we're going to move on to CJ. CJ was pretty much at the bottom, you know, towards the end of day 1. He did fight for his game, which is the reason why, a huge reason why he ended up staying in over Josh at the end of day 1. And because of that, he used it to potentially flip, although in the beginning, Ben flipped, so his flip did not necessarily matter. But he does self-describe himself as a messy player. He's like a messy king. And so I think with CJ, there is still a path. And I think, and sometimes it's literally all that matters is the fact that he tried to work with the opposing people. That could potentially earn him 3 fucking votes out of 7.
No, for real. I super agree with that. I love CJ. I always root for CJ anytime I see him play. I've also like never seen him not make a finale. So I'm just impressed that even if this game wasn't his like most impressive that I've seen him play, I think that he played a very honorable game in terms of like what he does best, which is being messy and dishonorable. I feel like he's kind of like a tornado in these games. And so even if you don't really get that from his talking heads, I know that the whole game, whenever he was allowed to be DMing people, he probably was getting them completely on his side and wanting people to work with him. They would be like, oh, I love CJ, so maybe this round we won't go for him, or things like that. I feel like that's the type of player that CJ is. And then knowing that he is personable to people, he's able to kind of get away with some messier things. I think this game, we didn't really see many huge successes from CJ in terms of what I've seen in other games, but I fully agree with you. What I was going to say was that he put an effort to chat to the people who are on the bottom and be like, hey, it's not just like blowing smoke up your ass. Like, I will do this and I will vote differently than I'm expected to right now. And just like you said, that's the type of thing where at the end game, if you can be like, hey, I did this, this, and this, I tried here, but I was still able to make it to the end. I liked you, but you made it to the jury, but I didn't need you clearly because I still did this. Like, those type of things win me over as a juror. And so I don't think CJ's out right now. I think that if anything, he might just prove why he's good at all of these games going forward. So.
Yeah. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I believe CJ won his very first org he ever played. I mean, he's clearly like, yeah, he's made some mistakes, but he's self-aware. He admits it. And like I said, I really do, as we clearly outlined, all 4 of them have a path to the end. It's really is, how well can you articulate your points? Who's going to be on your side at the end that's also going to potentially help you argue your point? And I think with CJ, there's a couple of things with him. One, we do hear Jocelyn say some point in this episode, I can't remember exactly when, but Jocelyn does say, it's right before Antonio gets out. Jocelyn says that, I would vote CJ at this point because, he kept talking to me and Jenny, and I can't tell if he was baiting us or not, which could potentially work against him. But if he can convince her, then he potentially has her vote. And then in addition to that, he does know Jenny outside the game. I'm very unfortunate that we had that kind of prior connection, but he does know Jenny. But we do see, and we can kind of transition into our little stick segment if we want to talk about that a bit. But it does come to light during Antonio's stick segment that they find out that he voted for Bloody, which effectively sent Jenny packing. So the question is will Jenny be pissed off? Will he potentially lose Jenny's vote, or will she be able to kind of get over that?
Right. Totally. Yeah. Good luck, CJ. I hope you can pull it out. I don't know if you will this game, but I think I don't know. He surprised me in like every game he's ever done. So never count CJ out.
Yeah, that is 100% true. But yeah, do you have any thoughts about the stick segments? We got to see Bloody and Antonio's stick segment this episode.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting to see them kind of like piece together what was going on outside of them. I think the 2 of them kind of recognized that they were bigger power players. And so for them to like no BS chat to each other about like what's going on, I'm sure that really put together a lot of pieces in their brain. I also liked how you could see people like Louise commenting on Erin about how like why'd she even apply and stuff like that, which obviously sounds harsh. That sounds harsh, but I mean, when you're on the jury and you're like just waiting for anything to happen, like those are the comments that come out. And I'm really excited for Erin to be like, oh yeah, fair, but I did do this, 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 and this. So I'm excited that the sticks has been kind of showing us like what these final people have to do to win over the jury. I think that's been a really fun part of these stick segments. And so I'm excited to see if the people playing like are aware of that without watching the stick segments like we've been able to, so that'll be a fun part of seeing this final episode.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a very interesting thing is, it's the reality that the jurors think they have, their perception on the game that is becoming their reality is like, they think that there's still this story of duos, which I don't know if you remember, but I think it was during episode 7, they had the idea that there were these pairs. There was the CJ and Michael pair, which actually is a true pair.
I'm like, that's a good guess.
that is a true pair. But then they also think that there's this Tracy and Aaron pair, which is definitely not the case. And they were like, if Jocelyn can leverage her position, she could go with one of the pairs and get the other out, which is super, super interesting. But, they're kind of, we kind of see some people's perceptions change. We see that of Ben. Ben was super against Michael and Aaron, and mainly Michael and Aaron about this whole shield thing. They're not playing the game, blah, blah, blah. But now we finally see, after Antonio's been booted, Ben's like, you know what? They're proving me wrong. They're actually taking out the power people, and these are the people that are left.
Totally.
So it is very interesting to see how perceptions have changed, but it is also a thing of can you, once again, as I've said a million times, argue your points? Can you get them to realize the truth of the situation? Because otherwise, their realities might be set in and they might never vote for someone.
Yeah, I super agree. It's interesting because I feel like from the jury perspective right now, Michael probably has the best shot, but that kind of leads you to be pleasantly surprised by people like Aaron, or be angry with the performance of Aaron and Michael maybe, and root for somebody like CJ or Tracy. It really does leave a lot of options for this finale. So I'm excited to see what happens. I think right now it would be Aaron that I'd be going for to root for. But I mean, you're right. It really comes down to kind of what they decide to sell in their short amount of time that they get at the end. So it all comes down to that. Yeah.
And it's very interesting. I've been hearing a split among everyone about who they think they're going, who they think is going to win. Even going back to the beginning of the season, people were saying oh, I think this person's going to win. I think this person's going to win. Even people saying Bloody and Antonio, which we clearly know is not the case. But yeah, people seem to be pretty divided of whether or not it's going to be Tracy, CJ, Michael, or Aaron that wins the game. But yeah, we will see. There's still one whole round to go and an ascension ceremony. So there's still a little bit of game that needs to be played.
Totally.
But anyway, let's move on to our final segment. It is the Ember Award. We are going to actually be giving out 4 Ember Awards this episode because we saw 2 rounds. So we'll be giving them out to 4 different people, very similar to what we did in episode 5. So starting off, do you want to give out your first Ember Award? Also, I apologize for anyone that doesn't know what the Ember Award is. It's sort of the MVP of the episode. And so anyone has their criteria. Everyone has a different criteria of what they think deserves the Ember Award. But generally speaking, it's sort of the MVP of the episode. So yeah, you'll be giving out 2 to the final 6 of who you think deserves those awards.
Yeah. I'll give my first one to Erin. I think that this was her episode. I think she deserves it for that reason. I think that she's setting herself up really well at the critical time to do so. And I think that this episode helped her really be able to prove people wrong going forward. So that will be really good. Good job, Erin. And I'd probably give my second one to Antonio. Friend bias aside, I just think that they did a really good job this game, and they fought so hard this last episode, knowing that his back was against the wall. I feel like if I was playing the game with him and maybe my head was a little bit big as it is, and I saw myself as a big threat, I would have maybe listened to his plea this episode to keep him around. So for that, I think that he did a very good job with everything. So I'll give my other one to Antonio.
Awesome. So I'm going to be giving my Ember Award first to Aaron. I don't think that really needs to be explained too much than what has. But I mean, yeah, it was Aaron's episode. We're kind of seeing Aaron's game get revealed as the time goes on, including starting off with their comments about Aaron right into how she was a big part of the bloody vote. Totally. In addition to that, my second Ember Award, it was a big struggle between Michael and Jocelyn. Oh, and then also with Aaron being in between 2 different alliances and then choosing which one she wants to go with.
Yeah.
So for my second one, it's between Michael and Jocelyn. I think I'm going to ultimately give it to Michael. With Michael, I think he has played the game well. People are starting to see it. People are talking about it in the stick segment. And with that too, we see that on two different occasions, Michael is in the room with the supposed now majority trying to vote someone out. So for instance, in the case of when he's with Jocelyn and Antonio, he's playing it off well. Like they have at least, they're thinking it's the possibility that Michael's going to do it. And I think Michael has been in that kind of situation a number of times throughout the season, and he plays it very, very well. Like nobody is going to call him out for a liar. He's very careful about his words. So I think that's why I'm going to give the second one to Michael. But I do want to give an honorable mention to Jocelyn, because I think Jocelyn did, given her position, the best she could possibly do. And then including literally winning the competition that she definitely needed to win and almost winning the second competition. So honorable mention to you, Jocelyn, but definitely Aaron 100% first and Michael for my second.
I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah. All right. So on that note, do you have any final thoughts before we conclude this?
Good job with the season so far, Casey.
Thank you.
I'm excited for future ones.
All right. So on that note, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Matt, for coming on. I really appreciate that. And don't forget to comment and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Sweet.